Pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our salvation. Amen. Some of you may be old enough, you may even be bold enough to admit it, to have watched the television program, TV, not streaming, not Netflix, not Hulu, not Vimeo, not HBO Max, right? Man, there were only 3 channels, so you either looked at it or didn't. The TV show called MacGyver. Anybody want to admit they watched that show? Raise your hands. Bob, somehow that doesn't surprise me that you watched MacGyver. Anyway, if you haven't, the show followed this supposed secret agent working for a fictional government who had been trained in all these different kind of spy assets, who could escape from even the most dire of situations. And he always did so using common items like duct tape and matches. Remember that? He once mixed salt with sugar and a small amount of weed killer to create dynamite. Another time, they were in a pickle and he just happened to make a jet ski using a funeral casket. One other time, he took pine cones and pine pitch and he made hand grenades. Have a hole in the hot air balloon that you need to escape? No problem. For MacGyver, just find some scrap paper and a little duct tape. You're good to go. And he always kept the duct tape in his back pocket. I don't know, the duct tape at my house is a pretty big, anyway, that's just one of the things that went with the show. But MacGyver could take anything at hand and make something that wasn't, something that was necessary to fit the situation and help him to escape. You know, he made something out of nothing. It was silly, I think, for sure. It lasted 9 seasons. Man, we were desperate. Silly for sure, but it relates, bear with me, it relates to our scripture today. In the text I read from John, we find Jesus surrounded with a host of people. And these people have been around, it seems, quite a while because they've lost track of time, and it is lunchtime, and as they look out at the crowd, they're becoming hangry. And Jesus turns to his disciples and he says, "Fellas, what are we going to do?" Now notice the important word in that whole sentence is we. What are we going to do? Well, the disciples, being human, they said, "Well, I don't know, Jesus, it's too much, it's too big, we have too little." They had excuses. Why, we checked with Peter, and he has a few granola crumbs left over from his breakfast. They're stuck in his beard. And Andrew, he has an old, moldy Twinkie that is probably well expired. And, we tried to call Grubhub. We tried to get a hold of DoorDash, but cell service up here in the Galilee is spotty at best. But then, as luck would have it, while they were continuing with their excuses and finger-pointing and evasion, Philip spotted a small child in the crowd, the small child standing there holding like his lunch bucket or something. He had a couple fish, 5 loaves of bread. And when they all looked at him, he was very eager and willing to share them. And I can imagine at that moment Jesus looking up to heaven and saying, "Thank you. and then kneeling down before the young man or girl, whichever it might have been, and saying, "Thank you," to the child. Then he took the fish, which, if you're around Galilee and a child has caught fish or something, the likely thing is that they were small fish like sardines, not big fish, but small fish. And the barley bread, and it's fascinating that John has recorded it was barley bread, because barley bread was the bread of the poor. Not wheat, barley. And so we know that this child came from a financially insecure household. This might have been his meal, but more likely it was for the whole household to get through that day. And Jesus took them, and doing his best MacGyver, used what was at hand to accomplish what needed to be done. Now, I can't tell you how many times I have read or I have heard this narrative, this story, as a child in Sunday school, as an adult in worship, or at other times. And the main point the preacher goes to, or the teacher goes to, the main focus always settles on the miracle of the multiplication. That Jesus took these 2 and 5 and fed all of these people, even having 12 bushel baskets left over. That's where we go, because that's what catches our eye, the flash, the bang, the big stuff. Look what Jesus can do. Jesus can save the day. But that's not where, and this is where it gets interesting, that's not where the miracle begins. Stay with me now. We jump over, we hurdle the first things that are said here, because that's not where the miracle begins. We always get to that place. Okay, Jesus will get us out of this. God will save us. But you got to take a few steps back, because before there was ever 1 and 1 and 2, or 2 and 2 and 4 and 4 and 4 and 8 and 8 and 8 and 16, Jesus says to his disciples, "Okay, fellas, what are we going to do?" You see, the miracle occurs when the disciples, with the generosity of this young child, offer what is at their disposal, setting aside doubt and replacing it with faith. And that's when big things begin to happen. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? It is to me. Even with children. Children can all, little kids will hand and share things easily, but it doesn't take them too many years before they say that magic word, "mine," and grab it back, right? It was a theologian, William Barclay, who helped me many, many years ago to see this story from a different light. A light which shone not on the multiplication itself, but the MacGyver stuff, so to speak, that took place before it. And that's, God uses whatever we provide. That's the first part. That even the smallest of offerings in God's hands for God's work accomplish seemingly impossible things. But the multiplication itself is what we focus on, and Barclay says, but we shouldn't. Because that's not the great miracle here. The miracle of multiplication is a daily event. Hang in there. It's an event, it's a miracle, it's a wonder that God built in creation from the very start. You take a seed of grain, you plant it in the ground, and you feed what? Multitudes. Happens all the time. I was privileged as a child to go down the stairs and on the dam, the Grand Coulee Dam in the state of Washington, on the Columbia River, where every year the salmon swim fiercely against the current of the Columbia River to get upstream to do what? And multiply. It's already in creation, this miracle, Barclay says. It's miraculous that you watch those fish. It's miraculous they make it at all, but they did. Just like the seed that's planted and the bread that we eat, the bread that we buy, or the fish that we get at the store every day, every year. It's built, that miracle is already built in. Now, you can say the time factor is different, I'll give you that, but we take it for granted and we overlook the miraculous multiplication that occurs daily. And so, in focusing our attention on the multiplication and missing that which precedes it, Barclay says you got to open your mind, you got to think deeper to find the message that John conveys here regarding faith, which is simply trusting enough to share. Sharing with no ifs, ands, or buts attached to it. You know, the disciples right away, well, there's too many people. Now, no ifs, ands, or buts assigned to it. From the child to the disciples, the fish loaves were not only unequal to the task, but remember, they came out of this child's poverty. It wasn't like he had an abundance to share. It was a meager amount that amounted to a lot for his family. No financially secured Jew would have eaten it. They would have thrown it away. But the child offered them. The disciples passed them on. They didn't keep them to themselves. Jesus blessed them, and the impossible was achieved. In faith, I think most of us acknowledge, I hope, or credit God with the abundance of blessings that we have, the much that we have. I would say that I know what it's like hungry, but I don't know what it's like to starve. I know what it's like to sleep under the stars, but because I've chosen to do so, and usually in the nicest waterproof tent I can find. I even know what it's like to catch a fish so small that I hope nobody sees it and I can toss it back into the water as soon as possible. Because, you know, there's something about us that wants to have the biggest fish, the best fish, whatever that might be, so that we can have a guest list for offering it. You know, and if it's a slow day, and I'm the only one who catches a fish, I keep it, right? I got to show my prowess. Jerry, I fished with you. You know that. I'd keep it, right? And I know that if you had caught it, you'd say, yeah, if you guys are better fishermen, you would have caught a big fish too, right? That's human nature. But what this text says, it's not God's nature. It's not God's nature. In the 1980s, when I was pastoring, the early 1980s, when I was pastoring on the plains of Colorado, the government, during the Reagan administration, did a program to try to help farmers because the prices were so low. It was called the PIC program. And what they did was they paid farmers not to plant a crop. They paid them not to do one thing that year. So the farmers, at least some of them, seeing a good deal, and remember out in that area, they didn't farm with water troughs or tubes as they're called, you know. They farmed with those big sprinklers, those circular sprinklers that automatically walk around. So what some of them did was they didn't plant where those sprinklers irrigated, which is what they normally would do, but they did plant in the corners that they had never planted before. So they would get what the government was going to give them and then sneak out with just a little more profit planting in that corner, which is so contrary to what you find in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, where the farmers left stuff for the poor to come out and glean so that they had the extra. That was just part of the process. You follow me? All said, and really where I'm getting around here, I would suspect if most of us stopped, paused, and then we stepped back, we have enough. We have enough, and then some. In fact, when I step back, I am baffled that I ever wanted some of that extra stuff, that it was so important in the first place. You know? I go up into my attic, I got boxes I haven't unpacked in the 18 years I've been here. I don't even know what's in them. But there's something in them at one time I couldn't let go of. I just had to have it and keep it, you know. And when I step back and think of my position and my comfort in life, I may at the time thought, man, this is all me. This is all mine. I accomplished it. I earned it. But when I step back and look back, I said, man, I was lucky. That's just a miracle. It's a miracle that my life has been as good as it has. When I graduated from seminary in '82, and my father retired as a minister in the same year, his salary was $20,000 a year. Now, I understand that's a number of years ago, but in my mind's eye, I thought to myself, you know, if I make $20,000, I'm going to be just great. Now, all of you out there who do the church's budget annually, I want you to ignore what I just said. But you get it? You kind of hear what I'm saying? If you step back, you can even see this miracle, how things have multiplied in our lives, and how, as they have done that, we too have 12 bushel baskets left over that could be shared. Contemporary living out of this that I was very impressed by. Within our denomination, the United Church of Christ, our sister churches, in New England and in the Plain States, St. Louis, and the Mid-Atlantic, they said we have a problem in this country with health insurance. And the problem being that we all face is that, you know, given not enough coverage and the right illness at the wrong time, we stand the risk of being bankrupt. You know, I fear that, and I have, you know, insurance and so forth, but I mean, I think that's a fear we all share. And so the churches there said, well, there's got to be something we are called to do, but how do you meet such a big problem, something even the government shies away from? Well, they began to raise the issue, and in the Southern New England Conference of the United Church of Christ, they raised $26 million so that 7,000 households could pay off their medical debt. In the Kansas-Oklahoma Conference, they raised $5.2 million and paid off the medical debt of 3,200 households. In St. Louis alone, they raised $12.2 million in those congregations there to do the same. And in the mid-Atlantic states, around D.C., Virginia, those areas, they raised $9 million to pay off the medical debts of 7,800 households. And I am willing to bet when the idea first came up, someone said, too many. Too much. Can't be done. You know, friends, we are blessed in so many ways. I mean, we are blessed in absolutely so many ways. Some blessed in bigger ways, I know, than others, but we are blessed in so many ways. And I would encourage you, I would submit to you that if you take the time to step back and really look, you can only wonder how you were ever so fortunate, how it ever happened. And I know in my life, I know it didn't happen just because of me. It's kind of like a miracle. So then if you agree with anything, any portion of what I have said, then you have to ask yourself the questions that are left. And they are, if you step back, what then? If you see what you have, what now? And if you're doing something now and you're looking at it all, you have to say, what next? What then? What now? What next? And let your faith be greater than your doubt, and the multitudes will be fed. Amen.